Today, I am going to teach you 50 different collocations. And if you don't know what collocations are, those are words or phrases that are frequently used with other words or phrases. And there are many different types of collocations. You can have verb-noun collocations. You can have adjective-noun collocations. But in today's lesson, I want to talk to you about adverb collocations. The idea, again, is not for you to memorize every single one of these. I think you may already be familiar with many of them, so a lot of it will just be review, but it's just getting that exposure so that you know which words go together. So let's begin with the adverb strongly. It's often used to emphasize. Some of the more common ones would be, well, you could strongly condemn, that you really are upset with someone and you might strongly condemn them for doing this thing. Or perhaps you could strongly disagree with someone. It's not just your normal level of disagreement. You want to emphasize that and say that you strongly disagree. You could also strongly suggest something, that you want to make sure that this person, well, probably does what you are telling them to do, so you may strongly suggest something. Now, if you want to add a little more to it and really kind of tell them, look, this is what you should do, then you might strongly recommend something. So suggest and recommend, they're pretty similar, but I think recommend has that extra little like, well, okay, this is what I think you should do. So you could strongly suggest something, but if that person doesn't listen, then you might strongly recommend it. You could also strongly support someone. If you want to show an increased level of support, you would strongly support them. The next adverb is fully. And this adverb is kind of just like talking about something that's complete. For example, you could say that you are fully aware, that you know everything that's going on around you and you are fully aware of some situation. For example, I could say that I am fully aware that you are not going to memorize all of these collocations. But in that case, I strongly suggest that you keep practicing, that maybe you rewatch the lesson again, because that is just going to help you build your vocabulary. You could also say that a person, if you're describing them, they are fully awake. They are definitely awake. They are completely awake, but you want to say they are fully awake. I hope that you guys are fully awake right now as you are watching this lesson. You would also use fully to say that something, perhaps a program or a machine, it is fully operational, that everything works, it's fully operational. And finally, you can use it with the adjective upright and say that someone may be standing fully upright. I always try to stand fully upright, but it doesn't always happen, and I end up slouching like this, but I try to stand fully upright. The next adverb that I have, well, it's actually two adverbs that can be used interchangeably. And those two adverbs are absolutely and utterly. Now, you can use either of these adverbs when talking about the adjectives that I'm about to teach you, but sometimes I think it may be more common to use one over the other, and as we go through these, I will tell you which one. So both of these adverbs, they kind of mean like definitely or for sure. For example, we can use it and say that someone is absolutely alone or utterly alone. Either one works, but in this case, I think it's probably a little more common to use utterly and say that, well, they are utterly alone. Sometimes it's not good to be alone, so let's put a positive spin on it, and I could say that somebody could be absolutely amazed or utterly amazed. I think either one of these adverbs goes well with this adjective if you, again, just want to add a little flavor to it and say, well, I was absolutely amazed when I saw the movie. It was incredible. I was absolutely amazed. Or we could use it with the adjective appalled and say that maybe you really didn't like something, you thought it was terrible, and you were absolutely appalled by this thing or utterly appalled. Again, either adverb I think goes well with this adjective. We could say that something or even someone is absolutely beautiful or utterly beautiful. I think in this case, I guess for me, I would tend to use absolutely more often than I would use utterly. If I'm talking about something that's beautiful, I'd probably say that it is absolutely beautiful. You could also be absolutely convinced of something or utterly convinced. And in this case, I think both of them are quite common, but well, I'll tell you my personal take. I think I would probably use utterly. Then we could use these adverbs with the adjective devastated. That maybe you could say we were absolutely devastated. We were utterly devastated when we heard the news. I think either of them go very well with this adjective. You could also say that a person might be absolutely furious or even utterly furious. Between these two adverbs, I would probably go with absolutely, but either one works. Absolutely furious, utterly furious. Then we could describe a person's feeling and say that they were absolutely miserable or even utterly miserable. Both of them work well. So if you want to really say that a situation was bad, perhaps you got caught out in the rain and you were stuck there and you got soaking wet and you just felt absolutely miserable. These adverbs also go well with the adjective ridiculous. And you could describe, well, either a person or probably more often a situation and say that it was absolutely ridiculous or utterly ridiculous. And finally, you could use it with the adjective stupid and again describe a person or even a situation and say it was absolutely stupid or utterly stupid. Both of them work well, especially if stupid is just not good enough and you really want to say just how stupid it was. You could say that it was absolutely stupid or utterly stupid. Then we have the adverb deeply, and it's just talking about a great amount. For example, you could use it with the adjective concerned, and you would say that you are deeply concerned about something. Or it's quite often used with regret. And you might deeply regret something. If you really want to say that you are, well, you really are upset about this and you wish that it had never happened, you could start out and say, well, I deeply regret that this thing happened. Then we could use it with the adjective divided and say that, well, perhaps people are deeply divided. I think if you're talking about politics, that is a great example. You could say, I can't believe that people are so deeply divided, that they won't listen to each other, they strongly disagree, and they are deeply divided. And I am utterly amazed at how absolutely ridiculous it is sometimes that people are so deeply divided. And finally, we can use it with ashamed, and somebody could say that they are deeply ashamed about something. So with all of these, keep in mind that they all kind of have a negative connotation. It's not talking about something that's overwhelmingly positive. If you are saying that people are deeply divided, or you're deeply concerned about something, or you deeply regret it, or you're just deeply ashamed. So keep that in mind. Next, we have the adverb highly. And this really, well, it kind of means the same as very. You're talking about a degree. And I think it does have more of a positive connotation to it. So we can start out and you might say that something is highly unlikely, that it's probably not going to happen. You could say it's highly unlikely that this thing will happen. You could also use it with recommend, that you highly recommend something. Now, this is a little different than strongly recommend, because I think when you highly recommend something, you're kind of telling that person that, well, you think this is the best. It is the very best, and that's why you highly recommend it. If you strongly recommend it, you do think it's really good, but it's kind of like you're maybe pushing it a little more on that person and you really want them to do it. So they are a little different in that way. But if you think something is great, it's absolutely the very best, you could highly recommend it. We could describe a situation and say that, well, maybe it's highly unusual. That is a common collocation, as well as highly controversial. That it's not just controversial, it's very controversial. It's highly controversial. We could also say that something is highly sophisticated. It's very complex, it's detailed. Maybe we're talking about some advanced science and we say, wow, it's just highly sophisticated. Or you could describe a person and say that they are highly educated, that they have gone to university, they have their master's, their PhD, and you would describe this person and say, well, they are a highly educated individual. Perhaps then you could describe a person who is highly educated and say that he or she is highly intelligent. They're not just very smart, they are highly intelligent. And sometimes if a person is highly intelligent, they may get a job in which they are highly paid, that they are earning a lot of money and they are highly paid at their job. Now let's kind of go in the opposite direction and talk about the adverb grossly. It means pretty much the same, like very, you're talking about a degree, but I say that it's kind of in the opposite direction because most of these collocations have a negative connotation. For example, you could say that something is grossly exaggerated, that it's not close to the truth, that some story, something that happened, and you'd say, well, it was grossly exaggerated. Or maybe you're describing a person and say that they were grossly negligent, that they made a mistake, they were negligent, but it was a very careless mistake, and you could say that they were grossly negligent. We could also use it with the adjective inaccurate and say that something is grossly inaccurate. If somebody's telling a story that was grossly exaggerated, you could then say, wow, that is just grossly inaccurate. That is not what happened. It was grossly inaccurate. We could also say that somebody may be grossly mistreated, and that is not a good situation if somebody is mistreated. And if they are mistreated, well, really bad, then you could say they are grossly mistreated. You could also describe a situation and say that something was grossly unfair. It just really wasn't fair. It was grossly unfair. Or perhaps say that someone was grossly reckless, that they didn't care about what happened to others and they were grossly reckless. Their behavior was grossly reckless. Or you could use it and say that a person might be grossly misled, that they were not told the truth, they were led to believe something that was grossly inaccurate, and in this case, you could say that they were grossly misled. And finally, we could say that, well, something or even someone was grossly underestimated. And in the case of describing a person, maybe that sounds a little surprising and like, oh, we grossly underestimated this person's value. They surprised everyone, and that would be a good thing. But if you're talking about a situation, perhaps that you were trying to plan for something, but you grossly underestimated what would happen. And in that case, that would be more of a negative connotation, and you might grossly underestimate the results, which means you were wrong. And yeah, that might not be a good situation. Then we have the adverb mildly, which really just means slight or not much. And you could say that a person is mildly upset. They're just a little upset, they're mildly upset. Or maybe they are mildly concerned about something. There's something that they should be a little concerned about, and you could say that they are mildly concerned. Or perhaps a person is mildly surprised by something that happened. So this is a great adverb to, again, just give that extra little bit of information and use mildly to describe maybe the way you feel. You're mildly upset, you're mildly concerned, or you're mildly surprised. Then we have the adverb widely. And it's a great adverb. I like using it because it really just means like universal. It's talking about everything or everyone. And you could say that something is widely available, that you can find this thing anywhere, everywhere, it's widely available. Or maybe you want to say that you're talking about some information that everybody knows about, and you'd say that it is widely known. And finally, we can use it with accepted and say that something is widely accepted. Everybody accepts this information as the truth. It is widely accepted. And finally, we have the adverb perfectly. It is another great adverb to make some very common collocations in which you're saying that, well, things are okay, but I think it's used in the context that somebody might be saying the opposite. And then you're trying to say, no, it's like this. For example, you might use it with the adjective normal. Perfectly normal. Somebody might be trying to say that, well, things are a little strange, this is a little weird, and you would say, well, no. Everything is perfectly normal. So, for example, perhaps I know many of you're learning English. It's quite common to make mistakes, but it doesn't make people feel good. So I could then say, hey, don't worry about it. It's perfectly normal to make mistakes. It's not strange. It's not weird. It's perfectly normal. You could also say that something is perfectly acceptable, that this thing is just fine. It's perfectly acceptable. Or maybe you could say that somebody is perfectly willing to do something. They're willing to do it. They are perfectly willing to do it. And again, maybe it would be used in a context where somebody you think that they're not willing to do it, and then say, no, I'm perfectly willing to do this thing. So I hope that all of this made sense. I know that I gave you a lot of collocations today, but again, the idea is not that you're going to memorize each and every one of these. Over time, you are going to learn all of these different collocations, and not only that, you will be able to use them correctly. I am utterly convinced that this will be the case. You will learn all of them because you are highly intelligent. I'm going to end it right there, so I hope you learned some new collocations today. I will be utterly devastated if you didn't, and I'll be a little deeply concerned. That's not true. It's okay. Everything's perfectly normal. All right. So long.